Captain Shesila watched the stars through the viewport of her merchant vessel and felt the familiar comfort of routine trade runs through safe space. The luminous prophet carried medical supplies bound for the outer fringe colonies. Nothing dangerous, nothing illegal, just honest commerce like her family had conducted for 6 generations. The Valori were known throughout the Galactic Accord as reliable merchants who never caused trouble and always delivered on time. Shesila's crystalline body refracted the soft lights of the bridge into gentle rainbow patterns across the walls. Her crew of 12 moved quietly through their duties, monitoring systems that had run perfectly for the entire voyage. Everything was exactly as it should be in the ordered and peaceful galaxy that the Accord had maintained for 800 years. Then the reactor alarms screamed through the ship. Shesila spun toward her engineer, Veskri, who was already pulling up diagnostic screens with trembling manipulators. Cascade failure in the primary core. Veskri's voice carried the harmonic overtones of pure panic. Secondary containment is breaching. The ship lurched violently, and Shesila grabbed the command rail to keep from falling. Her people were fragile compared to some species. Their crystalline structures could shatter from impacts that others would barely notice. "Emergency shutdown," she commanded, but Veskri was already shaking his head. "The safeties aren't responding. The whole system is collapsing." Red warning lights flooded the bridge, and Shesila felt her core temperature drop with fear. They were 3 days from the nearest Accord outpost, and their emergency thrusters wouldn't get them anywhere useful before life support failed. "All crew to emergency pods," she called through the ship-wide comm. "Prepare for immediate evacuation." Expression that stopped her cold. "Captain, the reactor breach is flooding the pod bay with radiation. We can't get to them." Shesila's mind raced through options that all ended in death. The Accord's emergency response protocols required a distress call to be filed, reviewed by safety committees, assigned to the appropriate rescue service, and then scheduled for response. A process that typically took 7 to 10 days. They had maybe 40 hours of life support left. "Get me the emergency beacon," she said quietly. Veskri moved to a cabinet that hadn't been opened since the ship was commissioned 20 years ago. Inside was an ancient piece of equipment from the early days of the Accord, before all the modern safety bureaucracy had been established. The old emergency beacon was supposed to be obsolete, replaced by proper channels and forms and review processes. But it had one advantage. It broadcast immediately on every frequency Accord had ever used, including some very old channels that modern ships no longer monitored. "Are you sure, Captain?" Veskri asked. "This beacon broadcasts on the dead channels too, the ones that lead to the quarantine zones." Shesila looked at her crew, at the young navigator who had just joined them 2 months ago, at the cargo master who had 3 children waiting at home, at all the lives that depended on her making the right choice. "Activate it," she said. "Someone might hear us, even if it's against protocol." The beacon powered up with a whine that seemed to resonate through the ship's dying systems. Its signal burst out into space on every frequency, including channels that hadn't been used for centuries. Channels that pointed toward regions of space the Accord had deliberately chosen to forget. 7,000 light-years away, in a star system not listed in any Accord database, automated listening posts picked up the signal. The Deep Space Monitoring Network had been scanning for intelligent transmissions for decades, hoping to finally make contact with the galactic community that humanity had glimpsed through careful observation. The distress call arrived at United Terran Navy headquarters on Luna within minutes. Fleet Admiral Chen stood in the command center, studying the decoded message, while analysts worked frantically to translate the alien language. "It's a distress call," the linguistics team confirmed. "Medical vessel. Reactor failure. Life support critical. They're asking for immediate assistance." "Location?" Chen asked. The navigation officer pulled up a holographic display. "Outer region of our monitored space, We can reach them in 3 weeks via slipspace. 3 weeks, Chen repeated. Do they have 3 weeks? The analyst shook her head. Based on their ship specifications, they have maybe 2 days before life support fails completely. Chen looked at the other officers in the room and saw the same thought reflected in their eyes. Humanity had been trying to make contact with the Galactic Accord for 30 years, sending peaceful messages that were either ignored or rejected. The one formal response they'd received had been a terse notice that Earth was classified as a prohibited contact zone due to humanity's Deathworld origin and aggressive nature. The Accord wanted nothing to do with a species that had evolved under crushing gravity on a world full of predators, diseases, and environmental hazards that would kill most galactic citizens within minutes. But now, someone from that same Accord was dying and calling for help. Spin up the Third Fleet, Chen ordered. Full battle group. I want enough firepower to handle any complications. Ma'am, if we respond to this, we're violating their quarantine, her executive officer pointed out carefully. Made it very clear they don't want contact with us. Chen turned to face him directly. Commander, there is a ship full of people dying in space, and they sent out a distress call that we received. In every human culture throughout history, you answer a distress call, period. She paused and looked at the star chart where the alien ship drifted helplessly. If the Accord wants to complain about us saving lives, they can file their complaint after those people are safe. Understood, Admiral, the commander said with a slight smile. I'll notify the fleet commanders. Within 18 hours, the largest military formation humanity had ever assembled for a deep space mission was ready to launch. 12 Dreadnought-class warships formed the core, each one carrying enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag. 40 destroyer-class ships provided escort and screening, their holds full of Marines in powered armor. Support vessels carried medical facilities, repair equipment, and enough supplies to sustain operations for months. The Third Fleet represented humanity's message to the galaxy. We are here, we are powerful, and we will help those who call for aid. As the ships activated their slipspace drives and vanished from normal space, Chen looked at the countdown timer showing how long until they reached the distress signal. 3 weeks to cross thousands of light years, while somewhere ahead, fragile aliens counted down their last hours of life support and wondered if anyone would come. Chen had seen the intelligence reports on Accord species. Most couldn't survive in environments humans considered merely uncomfortable. Most had never experienced violence beyond theoretical discussions. Most had evolved on gentle worlds where survival didn't require constant struggle against a hostile universe. They were about to meet a species that had clawed itself way up from the bottom of Earth's brutal food chain, that had turned survival into an art form, and that considered impossible rescue missions to be standard operating procedure. The Accord had spent centuries keeping humanity at arm's length because they feared what Deathworlders might do. They were about to learn what Deathworlders did when someone called for help. The luminous prophet drifted dead in space with only emergency lights flickering through corridors that grew colder by the hour. Captain Shesila had moved her crew to the bridge, where they could pool their body heat and share the remaining breathable atmosphere. 36 hours had passed since the beacon activated, and no response had come. Maybe no one monitors those old frequencies anymore, Veskri said quietly. His crystalline structure had dulled from the cold and stress. Shesila didn't answer, because she had been thinking the same thing. The dead channels were called that for a reason. They led to parts of space the Accord had sealed off centuries ago, when the Great Consolidation established the modern era of peace and bureaucratic order. Some of those channels pointed toward regions where dangerous species had been quarantined until they could be properly civilized. Others led to areas deemed too hazardous for exploration. The young navigator, Tresley, looked up from her station with large eyes that reflected fear. "Captain, I'm detecting movement on the edge of our sensor range. Shesila felt hope surge through her core. Is it a rescue ship? Tresley's expression changed from hope to horror as she analyzed the readings. It's 3 vessels. Configuration matches Kresh raiders. The bridge went silent except for the labored breathing of the crew. Everyone in the outer fringe knew about the Kresh, a loose collective of pirates who preyed on disabled ships and remote colonies. The Accord's response to Kresh activity was to file reports, convene study groups, and occasionally send strongly worded diplomatic messages. Actual military action was considered barbaric and contrary to civilized values. Maybe they'll just take the cargo and leave us, someone whispered, but no one believed it. The Kresh took everything: cargo, ships, and lives. Crew that could be sold in the illegal slave markets beyond Accord jurisdiction. Shesila watched the raiders approach on sensors. 3 ugly vessels covered in mismatched armor plates and weapons torn from other ships. Her people had no defenses, no weapons, no way to resist. The Valori were merchants and traders, not fighters. Violence was something that happened in historical documents, not in the modern civilized galaxy. The first raider attached to their hull with a magnetic clamp that shook the entire ship. Shesila heard cutting tools start to work on the airlock. Everyone stay calm, she said, though her own core was vibrating with terror. Perhaps we can negotiate. The airlock exploded inward with a blast that threw 2 crew members across the bridge. Kresh warriors poured through the opening, each one twice the size of a Valori and covered in scarred chitin armor. Assembled from scrap, but were clearly functional. The lead Kresh, marked with rank symbols that meant nothing to Shesila, stopped to the center of the bridge and looked around with multiple eyes that gleamed with cruel intelligence. Well, well, the Kresh commander rumbled in heavily accented trade language. A merchant ship with no guards, no weapons, no hope. My favorite kind. Please, Shesila stepped forward despite her fear. Take our cargo. Just leave my crew alive. The Kresh commander laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Your cargo is medical supplies, worth something but not much. But Valori sell well in the outer markets. Crystalline species are rare and fetch good prices from collectors. Shesila felt her world collapse as the Kresh began herding her crew into a corner, while others went to strip the ship of anything valuable. This was how it unfolded. Ended. Not from reactor failure, but from the cruelty that still existed in the dark spaces between civilized worlds. The Accord's committees and discussion groups and diplomatic protocols meant nothing out here, where violence was the only language that mattered. 7 days into their journey, the Third Fleet's sensors detected the distress beacon, and Admiral Chen studied the tactical display with growing concern. 3 vessels attached to the distress ship, the tactical officer reported. Configuration matches known pirate activity in this region. Pirates, Chen repeated flatly. The distress call was 9 days ago. If raiders found them, ma'am, we're detecting life signs on the merchant vessel, the sensor operator interrupted. Faint but present, at least 10 individuals. Chen felt the tension in the command center shift from concern to cold determination. Battle stations, she ordered. All ships prepare for combat. Operations. Commander Okafor, prep your Marines for hostile boarding action. The Third Fleet dropped out of slip space at the system's edge, like a hammer materializing in the void. 12 dreadnoughts, 40 destroyers, and support craft. More military power than most Accord species had seen in their entire histories. On the Luminous Prophet, the Kresh were arguing over how to divide the crew for sail, when Tresley gasped from her station. Captain, ships just appeared at the edge of the system. Dozens of them. The Kresh commander shoved her aside and looked at the sensors. For a moment, even his cruel eyes showed something like fear. That's not an Accord fleet, he growled. Those are warships, real warships. Shesila looked at the display and felt her core freeze. The ships that had appeared were massive, covered in armor that made Kresh raiders look like children's toys, and bristling with weapons that could only have one purpose. These were not rescue vessels or merchant ships or anything else from the Gentle Accord. These were predators built by predators. The communication console chirped, and a voice spoke in perfect trade language, though with an accent Shesila had never heard. Attention vessels attached to the distress ship. This is Fleet Admiral Chen of the United Terran Navy. You are ordered to release all hostages immediately and surrender your vessels. You have 5 minutes to comply. The Kresh commander stared at the display where the unknown fleet sat in perfect formation, weapons hot and tracking systems locked on. Terran, he said. I've never heard of that species. They must be from one of the quarantine zones, his second suggested. The dead channels. I don't care where they're from, the commander snarled. There's no way some unknown species is going to tell me what to do. He opened a return channel and laughed. Unknown vessels, you've made a mistake. This ship and its crew are Kresh property now. Turn around and go back to whatever hole you crawled from before someone gets hurt. The Terran response was immediate. 3 missiles launched from the nearest destroyer and crossed the distance in seconds. They didn't explode on impact. Instead, they struck with surgical precision, destroying the weapon systems on all 3 Kresh vessels, while leaving the ships themselves intact. Your weapons are now offline, Admiral Chen's voice said calmly. You have 3 minutes to comply. Shesila watched the Kresh commander's expression change from arrogance to uncertainty to rage. They think they can board us? He roared. Seal all airlocks. Kill half the hostages to show we're serious. But before he could finish the order, something struck the hull of the Kresh command ship. Shesila saw it on the external cameras. Boarding pods shaped like metal flowers with razor-sharp petals that carved through armor like it was paper. The petals peeled back, and figures in powered armor poured out, moving with speed and coordination that seemed impossible. The Kresh commander's communication device crackled with panicked voices from his other ships. They're inside. They're cutting through. Weapons don't work on their armor. They're too fast. Then the luminous prophet's hull rang with impact as boarding pods attached directly to the merchant vessel. The airlock, already damaged by the Kresh entry, tore completely away as human marines breached through. Shesila had never seen anything like them, encased in powered armor that made them look like walking tanks, moving with precision that suggested perfect control despite their size, and armed with weapons that hummed with barely contained power. The lead marine scanned the bridge, identified the Kresh warriors, and moved. What happened next took less than 30 seconds, but would haunt Shesila's memory forever. The humans moved like they were born for violence, because they were. They flowed around the Valori crew with careful precision, while hitting the Kresh with stunning force. Non-lethal rounds dropped the pirates before they could raise their weapons. Restraints appeared on wrists and legs. Mechanical efficiency. It was over before the Kresh commander could even draw his sidearm. The lead marine removed their helmet, and Shesila saw a human face for the first time. Dark skin, determined eyes, and an expression of controlled aggression that slowly softened as the marine surveyed the frightened Valori crew. Ma'am, the marine said in that same strange accent, I'm Commander Okafor of the Terran Marines. You're safe now. Shesila had never imagined that safety could feel so overwhelming. The Terran medical bay aboard the dreadnought Iron Resolve was unlike anything in Accord design. Clinical, but somehow warm, filled with equipment that looked both advanced and brutally practical. Human medics moved among her crew with surprising gentleness, their large hands careful as they treated injuries and checked vital signs. Your core temperature is dangerously low, the medic examining Shesila said. Her name tag read Williams, and her voice carried genuine concern. We've got you under heat lamps now. You should feel better soon. Shesila watched the medic work, and marveled at how these beings could be both terrifying warriors and careful healers. She had seen them move through the crash ships like natural disasters, yet now they handled fragile Valori with practiced care. "How do you know how to treat us?" Shasila asked. "Our biology must be completely different from yours." Medic Williams smiled, an expression that showed flat teeth meant for grinding plant matter rather than tearing flesh, though Shasila knew humans could eat almost anything. "We've been watching the Accord for years," Williams explained, "studying your broadcasts, learning your languages, documenting your biology. When you made first contact by telling us to stay away, we figured we should at least understand who we were supposed to avoid." The casual admission that humans had been observing the Accord without permission should have alarmed Shasila, but she found she couldn't muster the energy for proper diplomatic outrage. These Deathworlders had saved her life and the lives of her crew. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming when you didn't have to." Williams's expression softened further. "On Earth we have a saying, you always answer a distress call. Doesn't matter who sent it or where it came from. If someone needs help, you go." Admiral Chen arrived in the medical bay an hour later, her uniform crisp, despite the weeks of travel and the combat operation. She moved with the controlled power of someone who had lived their entire life under gravity that would crush most galactic citizens. "Captain Shesila," Chen said with a slight bow that seemed to be a human gesture of respect. "I'm glad to see you're recovering." "Admiral," Shesila struggled to sit up straighter, despite the medic's disapproving look. "I must ask, why did you come?" "The Accord rejected human contact years ago." Chen pulled up a chair, moving it with ease, despite it being designed for human strength and weight. "Because you sent a distress call, and we heard it," Chen said simply. "Whatever political disagreements exist between our peoples, they don't matter when lives are at stake." "But you brought a war fleet," Shasila pointed out. 12 dreadnoughts, dozens of support ships. This is enough military power to conquer half the Accord." Chen's expression became carefully neutral. "Captain, we didn't know what we'd find when we arrived. Your beacon was old and didn't provide much detail. For all we knew, you'd been caught in a war zone or faced threats that would require significant firepower to resolve." She paused and met Shasila's eyes directly. "Turns out we were partially right. You did face a threat. And yes, we brought enough force to handle it." "Always operate?" Shasila asked. "Overwhelming force at all times?" "We operate by being prepared for the worst while hoping for the best," Chen replied. "It's how you survive on a death world. You plan for the predator in the dark, for the storm on the horizon, for the disaster you didn't see coming." Shasila thought about the Accord's approach to emergencies, committees, and review processes, and careful deliberation that prioritized procedure over speed. "We would have debated for weeks before sending help," she admitted, "by which time we'd all be dead." Chen nodded slowly. "Different worlds create different priorities. On Earth, hesitation kills. You act fast or you don't survive. But that makes you dangerous," Shasila said. "The Accord was right to be afraid of you." "Maybe," Chen agreed, "but dangerous to whom? We just used all this dangerous capability to save your crew and capture pirates without killing a single being. We could have reduced those crash ships to atoms. Instead, we disabled their weapons and took them alive." "Why?" The question burst from Shasila before she could stop it. "Why show restraint when you have such power?" Chen's expression became something almost sad. "Because power without restraint is just destruction. We learned that the hard way through centuries of human history. Yes, we're strong and fast and resilient compared to most species. But we're not monsters. We're people who want the same things everyone wants. Safety, prosperity, connection." A communication officer appeared at the medical bay entrance. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple transmissions from Accord space. They've detected our presence and are demanding explanations." Chen stood and gave Shasila a wry smile. "Things get complicated. The Accord is about to learn that humanity answered a distress call. Shesila watched the Admiral leave and felt the weight of what was coming. The Accord had spent 800 years building a civilization based on the principle that military force was obsolete, that all problems could be solved through diplomacy and discussion. Now, a species with more military power than the entire Accord combined had just demonstrated what modern warfare looked like. And they had done it to save an Accord citizen who shouldn't have even been able to contact them. The political earthquake was going to be spectacular. 3 days later, the Third Fleet arrived at the Outer Fringe Station, where Accord officials waited with a mixture of fear and outrage. Shesila stood on the Iron Resolve's bridge at Admiral Chen's invitation, watching as the diplomatic crisis unfolded in real time. The Accord's senior arbiter appeared on the bridge. Main view screen. His hierarchian features arranged in what Shesila recognized as carefully controlled fury. Admiral Chen, the arbiter said coldly, you have violated the quarantine restrictions placed on your species. You have entered Accord space with military forces. You have engaged in combat operations without authorization. These are severe infractions that will have consequences. Chen stood at attention, but her expression never wavered. Senior Arbiter, we received a distress call from a vessel in danger. We responded according to our ethical obligations and rescued the crew from pirates. I will not apologize for saving lives. The method of your response is the problem, the Arbiter's voice rose. You brought enough military force to threaten every world in this sector. I brought enough force to ensure the safety of my personnel and the successful completion of our mission. Calmly, if you had proper security in your outer fringe regions, Captain Shesila and her crew would never have been endangered in the first place. The Arbiter's face flushed with color. How dare you criticize Accord security policy? I'm not criticizing, Chen interrupted smoothly. I'm stating facts. Your merchant vessels travel without protection through regions where pirates operate freely. When those merchants are attacked, your response time is measured in weeks. Captain Shesila and her crew would have died, waiting for proper Accord procedures to be followed. Better diplomatic delays than military aggression, the Arbiter snapped. Chen leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to something that made Shesila's core vibrate with instinctive recognition. This was the voice of a predator, making its position clear. Senior Arbiter, I want to be absolutely clear about something. Your permission to rescue people in distress, and we will not ask for permission in the future. If someone sends a distress call that we receive, we will respond. You can either work with us on establishing proper protocols for cooperation, or you can stay out of our way. But you will not dictate to us when and how we choose to save lives. The transmission cut to static as the Arbiter severed the connection. The bridge crew looked at their admiral with expressions that mixed concern with barely concealed pride. Ma'am, that was possibly the least diplomatic thing you could have said, the executive officer noted. Chen smiled grimly. Commander, I've spent 30 years watching the Accord debate while people died in the name of proper procedure. I'm done being diplomatic about it. She turned to Shesila. Captain, I apologize that you're caught in the middle of this. Shesila felt something crystallize in her core. A decision that would change everything. Admiral, don't apologize. You saved my crew when my own government would have filed reports about our deaths. I'm going to testify to the Accord Council about exactly what happened here. They need to know that there's a species willing to risk themselves for strangers. Chen studied her for a long moment. That testimony might make you enemies in high places. Then I'll have the right enemies, Shesila replied. Around them, the Third Fleet maintained its position at the edge of Accord space, a silent statement of capability and intent. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. The Grand Council Chamber on Axis Prime had never seen such chaos in its 800-year history. Representatives from 47 species filled the tiered seating, their voices creating a cacophony that no amount of procedural order could contain. Shesila stood in the witness circle at the chamber's center, very aware that she was about to say things that would make powerful enemies. The senior arbiter called for silence, and the chamber gradually quieted. "Captain Shesila of the Valori Merchant Fleet," the arbiter began formally, "you have requested to testify regarding the recent human incursion into Accord space. Please present your account." Shesila took a breath and let it out slowly. "Honored Council, I sent the distress call that brought the humans to our space. My ship suffered catastrophic failure and we were dying. The old emergency beacon was my crew's only hope." "So you violated protocol by using forbidden channels," a hierarchian counselor interrupted. "Channels that were sealed for good reason." "I used an emergency beacon to save my crew's lives," Shesila replied firmly. "And because I did, we're alive to have this conversation. Had I followed proper procedure, we would have died waiting for committee approvals." The chamber erupted in argument again. Some representatives nodded in agreement, while others shouted about the breakdown of civilized order. The arbiter restored silence and gestured for Shesila to continue. "The humans arrived with military force, yes," she went on, "but they used that force to save us from Kresh pirates who were planning to sell my crew into slavery. The human response was immediate, precise, and they captured the pirates without a single death. The Accord would have spent weeks debating, while we died." A counselor from the Genti Federation stood, their bioluminescent patterns flashing with agitation. "This testimony proves the danger. These humans have military capabilities that dwarf our entire Accord defense force. One species with more firepower than 47 combined. How is this not a threat?" "It's only a threat if they choose to use it against us," a Valori representative countered. "So far, they've only used it to rescue our citizens and stop pirates." "So far," the hierarchian counselor stood abruptly. "That's the key phrase, so far. What happens when these Deathworlders decide they want our resources, our worlds, our shipping lanes? We cannot match their military strength." Shesila watched the debate spiral, and realized that the real issue wasn't human military power. It was that the Accord's entire worldview was built on the assumption that military power was obsolete. For 800 years, they had convinced themselves that civilization meant the absence of force, that problems were solved through discussion and compromise. The humans had shattered that illusion in a single rescue operation. "May I speak?" Shesila raised her voice above the arguing. The arbiter nodded, and silence fell again. "Honored Council, I understand your fear. I was afraid too when I saw the human fleet arrive. But then I watched them work." She pulled up holographic recordings from the Luminous Prophet systems. "This is Commander Okafor and her Marines breaching the Kresh vessel. Watch how they move. They identify threats in microseconds and neutralize them without hesitation. Excess force. See here." A Marine pulls a wounded Kresh out of the line of fire instead of leaving him. And here they're treating injuries on pirates who just tried to kill them. The chamber watched in silence as human efficiency and controlled violence played out before them. "These are not mindless destroyers," Shesila continued. "These are disciplined professionals who understand violence so well that they know exactly when and how to apply minimal force. They're dangerous, yes, but they're dangerous like a doctor with a scalpel is dangerous. The danger serves a purpose. A scalpel can still kill," the hierarchian counselor muttered. "So can 1,000 other things," Shesila shot back. "What matters is the hand that wields it, and the purpose behind it." A new voice spoke from the high gallery, where the Accord's founding species maintained their seats. Ambassador Dreth of the Luminarians had served on the council longer than most species had. "Been spacefaring," Captain Shesila raises a point worth considering. Dreth's ancient voice carried through the chamber. For 800 years, we have built our civilization on the principle of consensus and diplomacy. But in doing so, we have perhaps forgotten that civilization itself must sometimes be defended. The chamber shifted uncomfortably at this heresy from one of their most respected elders. The humans did not conquer, Dreth continued. They did not demand tribute or territory. They answered a distress call at considerable expense to themselves, saved lives, and then offered to cooperate with us. Perhaps the question we should ask is not whether they are dangerous, but whether we have become so comfortable in our peace that we cannot distinguish between strength and threat. The hierarchy and counselor looked like he wanted to argue, but found himself facing down the Luminarian's ancient authority. Voice crackled through the chamber's communication system. Honored Council, may I address the assembly? The Arbiter looked like he'd bitten into something sour, but nodded. You may speak, Admiral. Chen appeared on the main display, standing on the bridge of the Iron Resolve with calm confidence. Counselors, I understand that humanity's appearance has disrupted your political equilibrium. That was not our intention, but it was perhaps inevitable. Let me be direct. Humanity has no interest in conquering the Accord, claiming your territory, or interfering with your governance. What we do have interest in is responding to distress calls, protecting innocents, and maintaining safe passage through space. Then remove your military forces from our borders, the Hierarchian Counselor demanded. Our forces are not at your borders, Chen replied calmly. We are in the outer fringe, a region you have effectively abandoned. We are establishing humanitarian response stations in areas where pirates and criminals operate freely because you lack the will or capability to secure them yourselves. The chamber exploded into outrage, but Chen's voice cut through. You can either work with us to coordinate security in these regions, or you can continue to pretend they don't exist while your citizens die. We're not asking for permission, we're offering cooperation. The Arbiter managed to restore order and glared at Chen's image. You present us with an ultimatum and call it cooperation. I present you with reality, Chen corrected. Your system works well within your core territories where everyone agrees to follow the rules. But outside those safe zones, there are predators who don't care about your diplomatic protocols. Someone needs to protect your people in those spaces, and we're volunteering. A younger counselor from the Valori delegation stood. Shesila recognized him as a progressive who had been advocating for security reforms. Perhaps we should consider the Admiral's offer, he said carefully. The outer fringe has been a problem for decades. Our merchant fleets face constant threats that our current response systems cannot adequately address. If the humans are offering to provide security, at what cost? The Hierarchian Counselor interrupted. What will they demand in return? Chen's expression remained neutral. Access to your medical databases so we can better treat injured Accord citizens. Navigational data for the regions where we'll be operating. And formal recognition that humanity exists and has the right to respond to distress calls. That's all. The Arbiter looked suspicious. No territorial claims, no trade agreements. No political influence? Not interested, Chen said bluntly. We have our own worlds and our own economy. What we want is to be good neighbors, which means helping when help is needed. Shesila watched the council struggle with a concept that didn't fit their understanding of how power worked. In their experience, those with strength always demanded tribute, territory, or political control. The idea that humans might genuinely just want to help seemed incomprehensible. I propose a trial period, Ambassador Dreth said into the silence. Allow the humans to establish their response stations in the outer fringe. Monitor their activities closely. If they prove to be acting in good faith, we expand cooperation. If they prove to be a threat, we have time to prepare accordingly. The debate that followed lasted 3 more hours, but eventually a fractured consensus emerged. the Accord would allow humanity to operate in the outer fringe on a provisional basis. Strict oversight would be maintained. Any sign of aggression would result in immediate cessation of cooperation. As the council adjourned, Shesila felt exhausted, but also oddly hopeful. The Accord was changing, whether it wanted to or not. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they brought with them a reminder that civilization sometimes needed sharp teeth to protect it. 3 months after the rescue of the luminous prophet, Shesila stood in the observation dome of humanity's first outer fringe station and watched the construction crews work. The station, officially designated Haven 1, but already nicknamed the Lighthouse by merchant crews, hung in orbit around a barren moon that provided mineral resources. Human engineers in powered worksuits moved massive structural elements with practiced ease, while Accord technical advisors watched from safe distances and took copious notes. "Your people work quickly," Vestry commented beside her. He had volunteered to serve as a liaison officer, partly out of gratitude and partly out of scientific curiosity about how humans accomplish so much so fast. "They've had practice," Commander Okafor said as she joined them at the viewport. The Marine had become something of a fixture around Accord observers, patiently explaining human methods and occasionally demonstrating capabilities that left civilians amazed. PR. Earth's environment doesn't allow for slow construction. Storms, earthquakes, volcanic activity. You build fast, or nature tears it down. Shesila watched a human worker catch a massive beam that had come loose, holding it steady until help arrived. The casual display of strength that would have crushed most Accord species was just another day at work for humans. "How many stations are you planning?" she asked. 12 across the outer fringe, Okafor replied. "Each one will have rapid response ships, medical facilities, and communication relays. Any distress call in this region will reach help within hours instead of weeks." "The hierarchians are not pleased," Vestry noted. "They're calling it a human occupation force." Okafor snorted. "Let them call it what they want. The merchant crews know what it really is." She pulled up a data pad showing statistics. The station program, traffic through the outer fringe has increased 40%. Merchants who avoided this region entirely are now using it because they know help is available if something goes wrong, Shesila said. "And the pirates?" Shesila asked. "Learning new professions," Okafor said with grim satisfaction. "We've had 3 attempted raids in the last month, all intercepted within minutes. Word is spreading that human response time is measured in heartbeats, not committee meetings." An alert chimed, and Okafor checked her communicator. "Speaking of which, we've got a distress call, mining outpost under attack by raiders." She was already moving toward the exit. "Want to see how we work?" Shesila and Vestry followed her to the operations center, where Admiral Chen was reviewing tactical data. 4 raider vessels converging on the mining outpost, Chen said without preamble. "They're demanding the miners surrender their equipment and supplies." "The Accord response?" "The local security committee is convening to discuss options," an officer reported. "Estimated response time, 48 to 72 hours. And the miners will be dead or enslaved by then," Chen said flatly. "Launch interceptors. I want our people on site in 20 minutes. Shesila watched human efficiency in action as the operations center became a controlled storm of activity. Orders flowed with precision, ships launched without hesitation, and within moments, the tactical display showed human vessels burning toward the mining outpost at speeds that made her dizzy. "You really do this every time?" Vestry breathed. "Every single time," Okafor confirmed. "Distress call comes in, we respond. No committees, no debates, no waiting." The interceptors reached the mining outpost in 18 minutes. The raiders, clearly not expecting any response so quickly, facing human destroyers, with weapons locked and targeting solutions calculated. "This is Commander Williams of the Terran Navy," a voice transmitted across all channels. You are ordered to stand down immediately and release any hostages. You have 60 seconds to comply. The lead raider ship tried to flee. It got exactly 30 meters before precision fire disabled its engines, without breaching the hull. The other raiders surrendered within seconds. Boarding teams away, Williams reported. Site will be secure in 5 minutes. Shesila watched the operation unfold, with the same mixture of awe and discomfort she always felt, seeing humans work. They made violence look like choreography, precise, controlled, and overwhelmingly effective. The Accord Council is going to complain again, Veskri noted. Probably, Chen agreed without concern. But the miners are alive, and the raiders are in custody. File their complaints after they explain to those miners why Accord procedure would have let them die. A communication request came through from a hierarchian counselor, and Chen accepted it with visible reluctance. Counselor Vroth appeared on screen, his expression thunderous. Admiral Chen, you have again deployed military force without Accord authorization. I responded to a distress call, Chen replied calmly. The same thing we've done 17 times in the last month. Unauthorized military action saves lives, Chen interrupted. Counselor, with respect, we've had this argument multiple times. The pattern is clear. Distress call comes in, you convene a committee, we save the people in danger, you complain about our methods. How about we skip to the part where you acknowledge that those miners are alive because we acted? Vroth's face flushed darker. You cannot simply ignore Accord authority. Not ignoring anything, Chen said patiently. We're operating in regions where your authority is theoretical at best. When you establish actual security presence in these areas, we'll happily coordinate with it. Until then, someone needs to answer the distress calls. The counselor's image cut out abruptly. Okafor grinned. You're getting better at making them angry, Admiral. It's a gift, Chen said dryly. Then her expression turned more serious as she looked at Shesila. Captain, I know this is uncomfortable for your people, watching us operate outside your normal systems. Shesila considered her response carefully. Admiral, 3 months ago I was dying on a disabled ship because my government systems couldn't help me fast enough. Now I watch you save lives every week that those same systems would abandon. Am I uncomfortable? Yes, also yes. The Accord is going to have to decide which matters more, our pride or our people. A young Valori officer approached hesitantly. Captain Shesila, there's someone here to see you. Shesila turned to find a family of Valori standing in the observation area. A merchant captain and his crew. Captain Shesila, the merchant said with a bow, I wanted to thank you. We were planning to take the long route around the fringe because of pirate activity, but after hearing what you told the council, we decided to risk the direct path. When our engines failed yesterday, human ships reached us in 3 hours. They towed us here and repaired our systems for free. You gave testimony that made this possible. Shesila felt her core warm. I only told the truth that our leaders didn't want to hear, the merchant captain replied. But more and more of us are listening. As the merchant family left, Shesila noticed similar groups throughout the station, Accord citizens who had been helped by humans and came to express gratitude. Might resist, but ordinary people understood what was happening. The Deathworlders were keeping them safe. An emergency alarm sounded, and Chen's expression sharpened. Multiple distress calls. Looks like a coordinated pirate attack across 3 systems. They're testing our response capabilities. All stations, scramble response teams, Okafor ordered. The operations center erupted into controlled chaos as human ships launched from every station across the fringe. Shesila watched the tactical display fill with blue icons marking human vessels racing toward red danger zones. This is what you do, she said quietly. Every time, without hesitation. This is what anyone should do, Chen corrected. We just happen to have the capability and the will to actually do it. Hours later, when all the distress calls had been answered and all the endangered people secured, Chef Sila stood again at the observation viewport. Pause. Below, the lighthouse station gleamed with lights as ships came and went, a beacon of safety in the darkness. Veskri joined her with 2 cups of warm beverage. "The council is meeting again tomorrow," he said. "The hierarchians are pushing for restrictions on human operations." "They'll fail," Chef Sila said with certainty. "How can you be sure?" "Because every day more Accord citizens see what I saw, that when you're dying in the dark, the only thing that matters is who answers the call." She gestured at the viewport, where a human patrol ship glided past, its running lights bright against the stars. "The Deathworlders will come," she said. "That's becoming more than just a promise. It's becoming what people expect. And once people expect to be saved, they won't accept a government that tells them to die waiting for proper procedure." Veskri was quiet for a moment. "The Accord is changing." "Galaxy is changing," Chef Sila corrected. "And maybe that's not a bad thing." Far below on Earth, Fleet Admiral Chen's counterparts were already planning the next phase: response stations in other troubled regions, coordination with reformist Accord factions, and the slow integration of human capability with galactic civilization. The Accord's political establishment could resist and complain and convene their committees. But every time a distress call went out, every time humans responded in minutes instead of months, every time lives were saved that would have been lost to bureaucracy, the old order crumbled a little more. A new era was beginning, one where civilization had teeth and the strength to protect itself. One where a mistaken SOS had brought not conquest or domination, but something the Accord had forgotten was possible. Warriors who fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The Deathworlders had arrived. With them, the ancient human tradition of answering the call.